Hello, this is part 2 of Quotations from Mao Tse Tung, chapter 22, Methods of Thinking and Methods of Work. I believe the next quotation is, "Concrete analysis of concrete conditions," Lenin said, "is the most essential thing in Marxism, the living soul of Marxism. Lacking an analytical approach, many of our comrades do not want to go deeply into complex matters, to analyze and study them over and over again, but like to draw simple conclusions which are either absolutely affirmative or absolutely negative. From now on, we should remedy this state of affairs." Next quotation. "The way these comrades look at problems is wrong. They do not look at the essential or main aspects, but emphasize the non-essential or minor ones. It should be pointed out that these non-essential or minor aspects must not be overlooked and must be dealt with one by one, but they should not be taken as the essential or main aspects, or we will lose our bearings." Next quotation. "In this world, things are complicated and are decided by many factors. We should look at problems from different aspects, not from just one." Next quotation. Only those who are subjective, one-sided, and superficial in their approach to problems will smugly issue orders or directives the moment they arrive on the scene, without considering the circumstances, without viewing things in their totality, the history and their present state as a whole, and without getting to the essence of things, their nature, and the internal relations between one thing and another. Such people are bound to trip and fall." Next quotation. "In studying a problem, we must shun subjectivity, one-sidedness, and superficiality. To be subjective means not to look at problems objectively. That is, not to use the materialist viewpoint in looking at problems. I have discussed this in my essay on practice. To be one-sided means not to look at problems all-sidedly, or it may be called seeing the part but not the whole, seeing the trees but not the forest. That way it is impossible to find the method for resolving a contradiction. It is impossible to accomplish the tasks of the revolution, to carry out assignments well, or to develop inter-party ideological struggle correctly. When Sun Tzu said in discussing military science, "Know the enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles with no danger of defeat." He was referring to the two sides in a battle. Wei Cheng of the Tang dynasty also understood the error of one-sidedness when he said, "Listen to both sides and you will be enlightened. Heed only one side and you will be benighted." But our comrades often look at problems one-sidedly, and so they often run into snags. Lenin said, "In order really to know an object, we must embrace, study all its sides, all connections and meditations. We shall never achieve this completely, but the demand for all-sidedness is a safeguard against mistakes and rigidity." We should remember his words. To be superficial means to consider neither the characteristics of a contradiction in its totality, nor the characteristics of each of its aspects. It means to deny the necessity for probing deeply into a thing and minutely studying the characteristics of its contradiction, but instead merely to look from afar and, after glimpsing the rough outline, immediately to try to resolve the contradiction, to answer a question, settle a dispute, handle work, or direct a military operation. This way of doing things is bound to lead to trouble. To be one-sided and superficial is at the same time to be subjective, for all objective things are actually interconnected and are governed by inner laws. But instead of undertaking the task of reflecting things as they really are, some people only look at things one-sidedly or superficially and know neither their interconnections nor their inner laws, and so their method is subjectivist. Next quotation. One-sidedness means thinking in terms of absolutes, that is, a metaphysical approach to problems. In the appraisal of our work, it is one-sided to regard everything either as all positive or all negative. To regard everything as positive is to see only the good and not the bad, and to tolerate only praise and no criticism. To talk as though our work is good in every respect is at variance with the facts. It is not true that everything is good. There are still shortcomings and mistakes, but neither is it true that everything is bad, and that, too, is at variance with the facts. Here analysis is necessary. To negate everything is to think, without having made analysis, that nothing has been done well, and that the great work of socialist construction, the great struggle in which hundreds of millions of people are participating, is a complete mess with nothing in it worth commending. Although there is a difference between the many people who hold such views and those who are hostile to the socialist system, these views are very mistaken and harmful and can only dishearten people. It is wrong to appraise our work either from the viewpoint that everything is positive or from the viewpoint that everything is negative. Next quotation. In approaching a problem, a Marxist should see the whole as well as the parts. A frog in a well says, "The sky is no bigger than the mouth of the well." That is untrue, for the sky is not just the size of the mouth of the well. If it said, "A part of the sky is the size of the mouth of a well," that would be true, for it tallies with the facts. Next quotation. We must learn to look at problems all-sidedly, seeing the reverse as well as the obverse of all things. In given conditions, a bad thing can lead to good results, and a good thing to bad results. Next quotation. While we recognize that in the general development of history, the material determines the mental and social being determines social consciousness, we also, and indeed must, recognize the reaction of mental on material things, of social consciousness on social being, and the superstructure on the economic base. This does not go against materialism. On the contrary, it avoids mechanical materialism and firmly upholds dialectical materialism. Next quotation. In seeking victory, those who direct a war cannot overstep the limitations imposed by the objective conditions. Within these limitations, however, they can and must play a dynamic role in striving for victory. The stage of action for commanders in a war must be built upon objective possibilities, but on that stage they can direct the performance of many a drama full of sound and color, power and grandeur. Next quotation. People must adapt their thinking to the changed conditions. Of course, no one should go off into wild flights of fancy, or make plans of action unwarranted by the objective situation, or stretch for the impossible. The problem today, however, is that rightist conservative thinking is still causing mischief in many spheres and preventing the work in these spheres from keeping pace with the development of the objective situation. The present problem is that many people consider it impossible to accomplish things that could be accomplished if they exerted themselves. Next quotation. We should always use our brains and think everything over carefully. A common saying goes, knit your brows and you will hit upon a stratagem. In other words, much thinking yields wisdom. In order to get rid of the blindness that exists to a serious extent in our party, we must encourage our comrades to think, to learn the methods of analysis, and to cultivate the habit of analysis. Next quotation. If in any process there are a number of contradictions, one of them must be the principal contradiction playing the leading and decisive role, while the rest occupy a secondary and subordinate position. Therefore, in studying any complex process in which there are two or more contradictions, we must devote every effort to finding its principal contradiction. Once this principal contradiction is grasped, all problems can be readily solved. Next quotation. Of the two contradictory aspects, one must be principal and the other secondary. The principal aspect is the one playing the leading role in the contradiction. The nature of a thing is determined mainly by the principal aspect of a contradiction, the aspect that has gained the dominant position. But this situation is not static. The principal and the non-principal aspects of a contradiction transform themselves into each other, and the nature of the thing changes accordingly. Next quotation. It is not enough to set tasks. We must also solve the problem of the methods for carrying them out. If our task is to cross a river, we cannot cross it without a bridge or a boat. Unless the bridge or boat problem is solved, it is idle to speak of crossing the river. Unless the problem of method is solved, talk about the task is useless. This quotation stood out to me. Let me repeat it. It is not enough to set tasks. We must also solve the problem of the methods for carrying them out. If our task is to cross a river, we cannot cross it without a bridge or a boat. Unless the bridge or boat problem is solved, it is idle to speak of crossing the river. Unless the problem of method is solved, talk about the task is useless. This is an interesting quote that should be considered. It's taken from January 27, 1934, from an article, Be Concerned with the Well-Being of the Masses. Pay Attention to Methods of Work. Mao's Selected Works, Volume 1, page 150. Next quotation. In any task, no general and widespread call is issued. The broad masses cannot be mobilized for action. But if persons in leading positions confine themselves to a general call, if they do not personally, in some of the organizations, go deeply and concretely into the work called for, make a breakthrough at some single point, gain experience and use this experience for guiding other units, then they will have no way of testing the correctness or of enriching the content of their general call, and there is the danger that nothing may come of it. Next quotation. No one in a leading position is competent to give general guidance to all the units unless he derives concrete experience from particular individuals and events in particular subordinate units. This method must be promoted everywhere so that leading cadres at all levels learn to apply it. In any given place, there cannot be a number of central tasks at the same time. At any one time, there can only be one central task, supplemented by other tasks of a second or third order of importance. Consequently, the person with overall responsibility in the locality must take into account the history and circumstances of the struggle there and put the different tasks in the proper order. He should not act upon each instruction as it comes from the higher organization without any planning of his own, and thereby create a multitude of central tasks and a state of confusion and disorder. Nor should a higher organization simultaneously assign many tasks to a lower organization without indicating the relative importance and urgency, or without specifying which is central, for that will lead to confusion in the steps to be taken by the lower organizations in their work, and thus no definite results will be achieved. It is part of the art of leadership to take the whole situation into account and plan accordingly in the light of the historical conditions and existing circumstances of each locality. Decide correctly on the center of gravity and the sequence of work for each period. Steadfastly carry through the decision and make sure that definite results are achieved. Thanks for listening. There's still a couple more I'm going to put in